Our republic is under attack from the Biden administration. They are misusing the powers of government to try to jail their political opponents. I want to highlight the continued abuse of President Trump. President Trump is being prosecuted by the Biden regime, and I say regime because they've abused their powers in a way that makes them more like a regime than an administration. He's facing prosecution and jailing in Florida as a result of Biden's appointee, Jack Smith, appointed there by Garland, so Biden's responsible for him, over this sham records investigation where the president's being prosecuted for doing what a president's allowed to do under the law, which is to designate and keep records as personal, whether or not Jack Smith, Garland, or the big media disagree with him on it. And the fight now before the court, the indictment, of course, has taken place, the arraignment's taken place, so the question is, when was the trial going to be? Now, the Biden Justice Department has been desperate to get the trial set for as soon as December of this year, just a few weeks before the Iowa primaries. And as I noted to you in the weekly update last week, President Trump's legal team said, well, that's not fair. There's so much to consider here. It's a very complex case, lots of discovery, classified information issues, and the analysis of that, constitutional issues, and of course, he's a candidate for president. So today, Judge Cannon, who is appointed by President Trump, she is the U.S. District Court judge in Florida that's handling the case, who's been under tremendous pressure by the regime and its apologists, as some have called it, the regime media, because she was a Trump appointee and she was skeptical of previously during the Mar-a-Lago raid Justice Department arguments and tried to hold them accountable. So she said, no, it's not going to be in December. It's going to be May 20th, the trial, 2024, which of course still is in the middle of the election. Now, in making her ruling, she said that the Justice Department's position would not be fair to President Trump. So it was a big slapback against the Biden Justice Department, the judge's decision. And she said, this is a complex case. Stop pretending it isn't. We're not going to have a trial. It won't be fair to President Trump to have a trial on in December of 2023. Now, instead, she said May of 2024. Now, I run hot and cold on that. I know the Trump team, I just saw before I came on air here, the Trump team was satisfied with the ruling because it gave them plenty of time to keep on fighting about this. I tend to think that it's the trial, despite her finding that the trial should begin in May of 2024, it's just not going to happen in May of 2024. I just don't see a trial of a former president of the United States, and at that time likely to be the leading candidate for president, to go forward in the middle of a presidential campaign like that. To me, that would be judicial interference in the election if Judge Cannon allowed that to happen. So I suspect this trial of it ultimately will be pushed past the election into the next administration, whoever runs it, and the left won't like that, but I think that would be the right thing to do, assuming that the trial goes forward at all, given the corruption involved and the lawlessness involved in the prosecution of Trump. I think there's more than enough information and evidence of prosecutorial misconduct, constitutional infirmities related to the theory of the law that's being pursued against Trump. And, so we'll see what happens here because all these issues are going to be litigated before May, and the idea that it's all going to be resolved one way or another before May, I think is I don't think going to be the case. Now, if the trial does take place in May, I mean, what a nightmare that will be for the Republic, because to me, it just will just make a mockery of our system of justice, make a mockery of our election, our right to govern ourselves. Should the Justice Department, run by Biden appointees, engage in a novel application of the law to try to jail his political opponent in the months before an election? I mean, how is that not election rigging? And if Biden had any spine, as I said before, and had a modicum of ethics, he doesn't even need to issue a pardon. He'd tell the Justice Department, we're not doing this, okay? This is too disruptive to America. You're walking on thin ice with respect to the law here. It's making a fool of us abroad. But we now know, based on other information, that that's not going to be the case, because the Justice Department, according to reports this week, leaked to the New York Times, that this Jack Smith plans to indict Trump again, plans to arrest Trump again. President Trump announced last week, or I guess earlier this week, that he received notice from the Justice Department inviting him to testify to the grand jury within 4 days. The grand jury that's still going on up here in Washington, D.C. What it's looking into, who knows? But generally, according to the leaks, obviously, it looks like to me, from the Justice Department to their friends at the New York Times, they're thinking of prosecuting Trump and likely to prosecute Trump for daring to oppose President Biden's election, both as a president and as a candidate, both of which were within his rights as president under the Constitution and within his rights as a citizen candidate under the First Amendment and other federal and constitutional laws. And this was my reaction that I issued on Twitter, and I think it's worth highlighting it specifically. Let me read it here for you. You can see it up there. You see, the nice thing about paying a little extra money for Twitter is you get to write long pieces like that. And believe it or not, the longer pieces get some attention. You can see 1.2 million people reviewed this tweet. Breaking: Biden, who is the most corrupt president since he was vice president, trying to criminalize criticism of how he was elected with an unprecedented indictment of Trump. According to leak to the allied New York Times, his operative, Jack Smith, threatens Trump with unprecedented and unconstitutional criminal charges for Trump's daring to exercise his duties as president to ensure federal election law is followed, and for daring to exercise his God-given First Amendment rights as a candidate to dispute a controversial election. Of course, by arresting and seeking to jail Trump, Biden is trying to rig yet another election in order to maintain and obtain additional power for him and his Democratic Party. All this is un-American, anti-constitutional, and would be a fundamental violation of the civil rights of President Trump. The latest plan to arrest Trump again is obviously designed to send a signal to Americans: accept rigged elections without complaint or be jailed. Frankly, the abuse of Trump by the Biden administration should be the subject of civil, criminal, and impeachment investigations, and #tyranny. And I talk about this a little bit at a speech. I don't think we can call it up now, before the Freedom Fest group down in Memphis, Tennessee. I know this is all about politics because I testified to the grand jury, as I told you, for up here in Washington, D.C. It was back in February. And it was hours and hours of being harassed on this election dispute, all of which is protected by the First Amendment and appropriate under federal constitutional law and, depending on the states, state laws. And that's all Trump was doing. That's all other citizens were doing. But, it's not just about Trump, because the Attorney General of Michigan, who's a Democrat partisan, announced that he's indicting and trying to jail for the rest of their lives 8 or so citizens of Michigan who are involved in the Republican Party or as volunteers or friends of leaders. Basically, I think at least one of them is over 80. And they signed on to be an alternative slate of electors. And they're trying to jail them for doing that, even though it's the sort of conduct that goes on election after presidential election, most notably in Hawaii in 1960, when there was an alternative slate of electors put forward to compete with the official ones, in the presidential election involving John F. Kennedy. But Republicans do it, they're going to get jailed. So this is a dangerous time. I keep on saying it, but I'm going to keep on saying it because there's urgency here, my fellow patriots. Our republic is under attack from the Biden administration. They are misusing the powers of government to try to jail their political opponents. Their Democratic Party allies in other jurisdictions, both in Michigan, New York City, Alvin Bragg, and we're also hearing this week they're planning to indict Trump in the Democrat-controlled county, Fulton County, Georgia, for his daring to question the mess of an election in Georgia in 2020. And so they're going to be targeting Trump there. So this is a search and destroy mission against the Republican Party by the Democratic Party machinery. And they're utilizing the precious powers and awesome powers. I don't mean awesome in the sense that, oh, they're great, they're wonderful. I mean awesome in the sense that they can destroy you if they're used against you. The awesome powers of the federal government the federal prosecutorial power and state criminal prosecution power to try to jail people not because they committed crimes, but because they were on the wrong side of a political fight. And this is another way, again, to rig the election in 2024. And it's designed to not only scare people off from questioning if the election outcome is suspicious or the process is suspicious, but even from participating in the election. Because the new rule is if you exercise your First Amendment rights, you will go to jail. That's the new rule under Biden. You will go to jail. They will censor you. And in the case of Trump, as I say here, they're planning to arrest him and jail him for exercising fundamental First Amendment rights. And now I will remind you, the First Amendment protects several rights. As I say, it's a God-given, these are God-given rights you have. The First Amendment recognizes those rights you naturally have as a human being, these blessings from God that we have as a result of our special humanity. You have the free exercise clause, right? The free speech clause, the free association clause, which is part of this, right? To collaborate with an association of a campaign or political party, and the right to petition your government, to go to your government and say, this election was bad, what can we do about it? Let's change and protect let's be sure that the correct result is reached as a result of either Congress taking appropriate steps or the states taking appropriate steps. They want to outright outlaw those constitutional First Amendment rights that citizens like Trump have and these poor citizens in Michigan have. And Michigan's not going to be the end of it. Democrats in Arizona are thinking of ways to jail folks who disputed the election there. It's happening in Georgia. And I'm pretty sure it's happening in other jurisdictions as well. So, this corruption, this effort to jail their political opponents, it's spreading throughout the nation, right? It's like the equivalent of the smoke from those socialist fires up in Canada. This corruption of and abuse of power designed to thwart their political opposition and jail them. And I tell you, it's by the time this is all over, we're going to look more like Moscow than Washington, D.C. in terms of our political life. That's what I fear. So if I were in Congress, I'd be doing everything possible under the law to stop this. If I were, for instance, the governor of Georgia, I'd do everything I could under the law to stop this. And of course, the Justice Department, in my view, the Justice Department's attack on Trump should be subject, as I say, to civil, criminal, and impeachment investigations. It's that bad. Why do I think it's that bad? Because we're seeing what it is they're nervous about when they go after Trump. What is it they're trying to distract us from? Which is their own criminal behavior, or strong evidence of their own criminal behavior in protecting Biden. You have also Congress, there's not a dollar that falls from the sky that isn't approved by Congress, certainly for Justice Department investigations. So if they object to the way the Justice Department is investigating Trump and trying to jail him and trying to abuse his civil rights, then why are they funding it? They can defund Jack Smith's investigation. They can stop government money for the illicit prosecutions of Trump. Again, it's going to be more than one, right? They can defund monies, federal monies, for jurisdictions like Michigan, jurisdictions in Georgia, jurisdictions in New York, who are abusing their powers to target Trump and other innocent American citizens. And it doesn't have to mean, they're not necessarily going to shut down prosecutions, but they can say, if you're violating civil rights of citizens, there are going to be restrictions on federal funding for your jurisdictions. We're not giving you money that you can spend on somewhere else, so you can spend elsewhere to abuse citizens under the United States Constitution, who have, exercised their rights under the United States Constitutions, their civil rights. So there are all sorts of things that Congress can do. And I tell you, if you're concerned about the future of the Republic, I implore you to ask your member of Congress what they're doing about it. You can call the House at 202-225-3121 and ask for your House member. That's the Capitol switchboard. The same goes for your senator. Ask your senator, where's your leadership on this issue? There are Republican candidates running around Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina, all over the place. Ask them, where's their leadership on this issue? The challenge, I think, for Republican candidates who, I understand there's a primary race. They don't, if you're, Trump is in a primary, there are candidates against him, and they're going to be critical of him. I understand it. That's politics. But it would seem to me that any citizen running for office, and I hold the standard for Democrats and Republicans, should denounce this. And that seems to me the test for those who don't want Trump to be the primary, the nominee for the party is, look, I don't want, you say, I don't want Trump to be the nominee for the primary if that's the position of someone like Chris Christie or Tim Scott or Ron DeSantis. But I tell you what, I don't want the Justice Department to abuse the rule of law. And if they continue to do so, this is the reaction they will get from me. And they should be denouncing it. I mean, the test is that are you going to sit by while your political enemies are abused by the Justice Department? I hope that's not the case for Republicans, but it kind of is the case for too many of them. And it's a lot of reasons. It's a lot of the reason you hear some silence from Washington, D.C., from some Republican leaders, because they like to see Trump harassed and abused. And and if it meant abusing you, they wouldn't care either. I remember during the years of the tax Lois Lerner's years, by the way, Jack Smith, who was working with Lois Lerner to target American citizens. There are more than a few Republicans who like the idea of the Tea Party populists who are critical of Republican leadership being suppressed by the IRS. And that's why there wasn't much done to go after Lois Lerner. So our Republic is under assault. I keep on saying it. Judicial Watch is doing its part to expose what's going on. We have litigation. We stand true and fast for the rule of law and our Constitution. As I said, we've been harassed by the Jack Smith team because we are effective, because we've been telling the truth about the corrupt targeting of Trump. I was brought in, Judicial Watch was harassed with a document subpoena. I was brought in to have to testify in retaliation, I believe, for telling the truth about the abuse of Trump. So Judicial Watch is going to stand strong, and the question is, will other citizens stand strong too? In the least, call your senators, call your congressmen. Tell your neighbors, tell your friends that there's a real problem in Washington, and it's not a joke what's happening to Trump, because when they're done with Trump, as you see in Michigan, they're going after the Michigan equivalent of the little old lady from Pasadena to try to jail her for the rest of her life for daring to dispute the Biden election. I don't know what the Michigan equivalent of Pasadena is. Maybe you can tell me below. But you all know what I mean. So I'm outraged. I'm upset about it. And I'm not going to give Republicans a pass for doing nothing. Hearings are great. This was an important week for disclosures. Senator Grassley deserves a medal for a lot of reasons. His willingness to release this document, he deserves credit for. Congressman Comer, his hearing here, the IRS witnesses was great. And of course, Jim Jordan continues to do some good work. But hearings are not what they're put on earth for. It's to get things done, to get accountability, and to use all the tools available to them under the Constitution. For instance, there's going to be a government funding fight towards the end of the year, I guarantee you. And what happens is they're supposed to spend all this money, and they spend it through an omnibus, and either they do it or the government, quote, shut down. Never really shuts down. Parts of it gets shut down. Are they willing to shut down the government to protect Trump from being jailed? Protect you from being censored? You pick the topic. If not, why not? Is there anything important enough? Is our republic important enough to shut the government down for a few weeks? To stop the Justice Department from abusing the core rights under our Constitution, the civil rights of Trump and other citizens? I think so. So those are my thoughts. And of course, Judicial Watch will continue using the Freedom of Information Act through requests, federal lawsuits, and dare I say it, education. I go on social media, Judicial Watch goes on social media, we talk about these issues, and the left goes ballistic because we tell the truth in a way they don't like. And as I said, it's not just the left that goes ballistic. Jack Smith goes ballistic because they're sending FBI agents to my home. Actually, that was done by the Biden Justice Department. He just doubled down by forcing me to go before the grand jury, even though he didn't need me to do that. So things are not going to get better, guys. They're going to get worse. They're going to get worse. I'm warning you, it's going to get worse. Our republic is on the brink. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and like our video down below.